Yeah, so our topic for exploration is the mutation in human consciousness. This mutation word was used by Krishnaji to indicate a certain kind of change. Now, change is always from this to that. And when it is a change from this to that, it is not really a change. And one can come back to this from that. And so it is really not a change, and Krishnaji used to call it as the modified continuity. And change also indicates time, because to change you need time. So the change takes place over a period of or span of time. So a change which takes place over a long period of time, slowly, that is referred to as the evolution, the biological evolution. So in biological evolution, the biological changes or the development takes place over a long period of time. And we see various species developing, coming into existence, the old species going out of existence, and from the new species further changes and so on. And this process happens gradually in nature, and that is referred to as the biological evolution. So biological evolution slowly unfolds the biological potential of the living beings. So we see evolution, say from plant to animal, animal to human, and maybe from human to further. So the evolution is a natural process happening, and Krishnaji also accepts that the biological evolution is a fact. But the question he raises is that although the human beings have evolved or developed biologically, means physically, and when we talk about physically, it includes the technology, because technology is a movement of physical development. And so the human beings have evolved, developed technologically, but psychologically they have not evolved. Psychologically they are primitive, because whatever is the psychological nature and the psychological content of a modern man, it is the same as the psychological content of the ancient man. So a man living in cave in ancient times, he was also afraid, he also used to feel insecure, he also was violent, he also had his concerns, jealousies and all those things. And all that psychological nature or content we see in the modern man also. The modern man is also afraid, he also becomes violent, he gets jealous. We see all the psychological reactions in the modern man also as they were there in the ancient man. And so, if we ask, has man really changed psychologically? Then we have to say no, because psychologically he is the same. Maybe because of the technology he has more resources, more means to express his psychological nature. A violent caveman maybe could kill another human being just by a stone or by a club, and the modern man who is violent, he can kill human beings in millions. He has more sophisticated weapons, he has more sophisticated ways of destroying things and so on, and therefore it's become really a very dangerous situation, because we have a situation where a highly developed technology in the hands of a very primitive psychological human beings. Psychologically, human beings are still very primitive because they live as per this psychological content. So the question arises, why human beings evolved or developed technologically, biologically, but why have they remained primitive psychologically? Why didn't they change if evolution is a gradual change and they have been gradually evolving biologically, physically, having more capable bodies, more capable brains, but psychologically, why they have not evolved? Why are still they the same? And therefore, Krishnaji doesn't accept this psychological evolution. He says there is no such thing as psychological evolution. The human beings may continue another million years with the same psychological nature and they are not going to change. And therefore, there has to be a different kind of change, which is not a change which will take place gradually over a long period of time. And psychologically, that is not possible. And we will also go into that. We will take some examples and see how the psychological change is not possible in time. And so there has to be another way. There has to be something else which can bring about this psychological change in a human being. And what could be the nature of that change, how it can take place, and after a human being changes psychologically, then what will be his life like, and so on. So all this Krishnaji has talked about, and we are going to explore that. So a gradual change over a long period of time, as far as psychological realm is concerned, is out of question. So he says the change has to be immediate. The change has to be radical, so complete that the old is no longer there and only the new which comes into existence, that will prevail. Now such a change he is calling as psychological mutation, because you see, he was looking for an appropriate word to express the kind of change he was referring to. So initially he used the word change. Then when change means only a modified continuity, a change means just from here to there over a period of time. So he said, no, that's not the change I am referring to. He said that there has to be immediacy of the change. So then he used the word revolution, right? Inner revolution or psychological revolution, because in revolution it is immediate. There is no not much time gap. Revolution brings about an immediate change. So he used that word. But then again, because he was not very happy with that word revolution, then he used the word transformation. That is, thing transforming itself completely. But again, transforming from this form to that form. So again, he was not very happy with that word. Then he used radical transformation and all these things. And finally, he settled with this word mutation. So psychological mutation. So now mutation word is used usually in genetics, in biological changes in that context. So you see how the new species are formed. One is this usual process of evolution. Gradually, as the members of that species, they live their life and acquire various abilities and capabilities, and those capabilities they get genetically encoded and transferred from generation to generation, and a new species evolves like that. So that is one way of evolution of or the creation of a new species. But sometimes what happens is that a genetic change happens suddenly. There may be some reasons, some causes for that thing to happen, but suddenly there is a genetic change, and as a result of that genetic change, a member of a new species is formed, because according to that genetic change, that member, that entity in whom that change has occurred, it acquires some capabilities, certain capacities or some properties which are not there with the other members of that species. So, which means that a member of a new species gets created because of that sudden genetic change. Now, most of the time what scientists have found is that this sudden genetic change, whatever new species it brings about, usually they are not able to adapt to the environment or to the situation or circumstances prevailing at that time, and therefore that member in whom this change has occurred, he is not able to survive. So it dies, and with that death the possibility of the new species also ends. But if this change makes this member more adaptable, more capable, and therefore better able to survive in the environment, then that member continues, and through that member then this change gets transferred to the newly born members of that species, and then slowly over several generations that species gets established. So this is another way of the creation of new species which we find happening in nature. So the word mutation has been picked up from that, which is a sudden irreversible change. That means once the mutation happens, the new species coming into existence, the member cannot go back to the old species again. It is irreversible. So when Krishnaji talks about psychological mutation, means a psychological change which is irreversible. So if you say that a person has psychologically mutated and therefore he has changed his psychological state, that means there is no longer fear, there is no longer violence and so on. So that change means it is final. So if you say that the person has mutated, which means that he will never be afraid again. There is no question of going back to the old ways of life. So he will no longer be afraid, he will no longer be violent, and it's completely changed. And the mutation doesn't take time, in the sense there is not a period of time. It happens suddenly, and when it happens, a new thing is created or born. Then there is no causal relationship between the earlier existence and the new existence that comes about due to mutation. So if we say that the entity was A before the mutation, and after the mutation an entity B is created, then there is no causal relationship between A and B, which means that you cannot design a process by which you can change A to B. and there is no way to change A to B except this mutation. And so there is no causal relationship, that means A is not the cause of B. From A you cannot move to B through a gradual process, step by step. You cannot devise such process, because we have processes in technology where we convert one thing into another, and all these chemical plants and many other machineries, they do processing, and through processing they change one thing into another. But in this case, no such process is possible, because there is no causal relationship between the two. Then the new thing which comes into existence is so totally different from the old thing that was, that there is almost no relationship between the two. So if you put those two things before a person, there is no way he can find out that this second thing, or B, has come into existence from A. There is no way he can tell. That means there is absolutely no connection between the two. So what is interesting is, when you are psychologically mutated, then the new psychological state has nothing to do with the old psychological state. And a person in a new psychological state, if you ask him, he will say he was never in the old psychological state, because no connection at all. And he would say that he was always the B kind of psychological state, that means the new psychological state, whatever he is. So a psychological change means the psychological mutation. But in our life, because we are so much used to see change happening gradually, and because at the physical level we do see things happening over a period of time. I want to become an engineer, so I study and spend time, and over a period of time I become an engineer. Or I want to acquire certain skills, then I spend time, I work upon it, learn, and over a period of time I have those skills. So most of our life we have been living like that, and so we are always in the process of becoming at the physical level. I want to become better and better. If I have a certain skill, I want to enhance that skill and have a better and better skill, and so on. So it is always a movement towards better and better and better. Now, when we consider ourselves psychologically and look at ourselves what we are psychologically, and if we are not happy with what we are psychologically, and therefore we want to change, right, then we apply the same method there also. So if a person finds that he is violent, then he wants to become non-violent. And he thinks that just as gradually he could become from an ordinary person to an engineer, or just as gradually he could acquire various physical skills, so similarly he can gradually become from a violent human being to non-violent human being. He can gradually become like that, and therefore he makes efforts in that direction. And he also feels that yes, slowly he is getting less and less violent, and therefore he justifies his becoming, and he feels that yes, during the course of time, finally he will be completely non-violent. But is he really becoming less and less violent? Because even if you accept that he is becoming less and less violent, right? So he is now almost 99% non-violent, and only 1% of violence is left, which he has to overcome, right? And at that stage, there is a strong provocation. And as a result of the strong provocation, he becomes violent, 100%. Then what happens to that gradual process? All that 99% achievement comes to nothing. It becomes zero. And this happens. You must have seen. You decide that I will not get angry. I will be quiet. I will watch my anger, right? And then you may say that yes, maybe for 1 year, I was not getting that much angry. I am relatively quiet. But after 1 year, suddenly some provocation happens, some incident happens, and then you flare up with anger. And that anger is again 100%. And so all the efforts that a person has made to become quiet come to nothing. So from 99 you come back to zero again. And we see this happening. Human beings have not been able to change their psychological nature through a gradual process. And probably we realize that, and therefore we say that it's not possible to change the human nature. Human beings are born with that nature. That is their swabhava. And it's not possible to change that swabhava. They will be always like that. All that you can do is just to adjust with that. Make some adjustments, make some compromises, and somehow manage this so that you don't create unacceptable consequences for yourself as you live your life. So that is how we have learned to put up with our psychological nature. And we say that it's not possible to change. A human being will be always jealous, he will always get angry, he will always feel insecure, right? There will be always fear in his life, and you can't change that. So if you can't change, just accept, do the best what you can, learn to manage them. So there are, schools which teach you management of anger or management of, particularly in most of the cases of domestic violence, the husband is asked to undergo these courses of managing anger. So he goes to the psychiatrist and then they teach him how to manage his anger and other reactions. So that is how we live. And Krishnaji says that it is possible to change the human nature. It's not the gift of the nature. Human beings have become what they are due to their own way of living. It's not that nature has made them like that, because that is again another misconception which we have. We say that the nature has made us like this and therefore we can't change. But it is not the nature. It is we who have made us what we are. It is explainable. You can see that a living being interacts with the environment, and that interaction is the life of that human being or that being, right? Any living being, that means any being which has the consciousness, it could be plant, it could be tree, it could be animal, it could be human being. A living being is constantly interacting with the environment, and through that interaction, lot of things it is gathering. Through that interaction, that living being is learning to survive, because survival is the first concern of any living entity. And through this interaction with the environment, that living being is learning to survive. And in that learning process, it is learning lots of things. And as it gathers the knowledge through this interaction with the environment, and based on that knowledge, it responds or interacts with the environment. So that is how its whole nature builds up, through that interaction. And so through that interaction, if he finds danger, he feels afraid, so fear is already there, and so that becomes his response. Or something happens against his wishes or against his desires, he gets angry, and so that anger becomes part of his psychological existence. So like that, as a human being grows and goes through all experiences through which he gathers the knowledge, stores it in the brain as the memory, and that is what becomes his nature. So the nature of human being, the swabhava, is not the gift of the nature, it is the human beings who have created it for themselves. And even in ordinary, you can say day-to-day life context also, you will find that to a given situation you respond in a certain way, right? Then next time a similar situation arises, you are likely to respond almost in the same way. Maybe slight change here or there, but more or less. And after constantly responding in the same way in that kind of situation, right, then nth time your response comes automatically. The moment that situation arises, immediately that kind of response comes out. So when that happens, then you say that now that has become his swabhava. So by repeatedly responding to a given situation in the same way, you have made it your swabhava, your nature. And so in future you will keep on responding according to that. So which means that it's not the nature or the cosmos who has made your swabhava like that, but it is you who has made your swabhava like that by responding. You could have as well responded in a different way, then that wouldn't have become your swabhava. So we are making us psychologically what we are. And when that gets strengthened, that gets firm, that gets crystallized, that becomes definite, so strong, and then when if we want to change it, we find it very difficult. Because whatever energy we have put into all that process for becoming like that, now we can't oppose it. We have to have the same energy to come out of that, and we find that we are unable to come. So then we accept it. So our swabhava is our own creation. It's not the gift of the nature. And if we have created it, we can also change it. Nature is not going to change it. And therefore, if evolution is a natural process, and if nature is not going to change our swabhava, because nature has not made it, we have made it. So which means that there is no role of nature in changing you psychologically, which means that there is no such thing as psychological evolution. Biological evolution, yes, but psychological evolution, there is no such thing. And therefore, if human beings do not change, they will continue what they are psychologically for another million years and so on. But now in this age, modern age of technology, those million years are not available for human beings because of the modern technology. The human beings have now the capacity or means to destroy themselves. They have the weapons of mass destruction and they can use those weapons on themselves. We have seen in wars and various such activities, human beings killing other human beings, and through this conflict between the nations, there is a real possibility that all these weapons of mass destruction will be used by human beings to kill themselves. So this is an irony that for a human being, progress means to the capability to kill themselves, to destroy themselves. And that is one kind of crisis. The other kind of crisis is that most of the function of the brain is being taken over by the machines. The artificial intelligence is just coming up, but when it is fully functional, fully developed, then most of the function of our brains will be taken over by these machines through artificial intelligence. And then nothing much left for our brains to do. And when a brain is unoccupied, not required to function, naturally it will tend to absorb itself into all kinds of entertainment. Pursuit of sensations, pleasures, entertainment, and technology is capable to give or provide all kinds of gadgets, sources, means of entertainment, and human beings will get caught up in that. And if a human being is caught up in entertainment, which is just a passive state of experiencing just sensations and brain is not being used at all, then by the law of evolution, the brain will start deteriorating, because the law of evolution says that either you use it or you lose it. If you don't use, you lose. And therefore, if you don't use your brain, you are going to lose it. And so, if the brain deteriorates, its capabilities they start disappearing and all this thing, and finally, that will be the end of human race. And this is there on the horizon. It's not that it is going to come after thousands of years or millions of years. It is right there on the horizon, and it is taking over. It's becoming part of human life, and therefore there is really no time for human beings. They have to act immediately, they have to do something urgently, and they have to do it with regard to their consciousness. And that is what Krishnamurti refers as the crisis in human consciousness. So he says that the crisis is not there outside, the crisis is within, in our consciousness, because we have to change our consciousness radically and bring into existence a new consciousness, which is completely different from the old one. And only that can save the humanity. So he is pointing that crisis in consciousness, and he is also trying to convey the urgency of this change. And he says that the human beings really have no time. They cannot wait for another 1,000 years to change. By that time, a nuclear war may take place and the majority of the human beings will just get destroyed. And so, that change has to happen immediately, and that is the mutation. So, a psychological mutation must happen, has to happen, and only that can save the humanity. So, the question is now, how can a psychological mutation happen? In what way it is possible? We have said that there is no step-by-step process. There is no process or technique or method which you can follow and bring about that mutation. Because there is no causal relationship, as we have said. If you want to change from A to B, and between A and B there is no causal relationship at all, so you cannot devise a technique which will change you from A to B. Because to develop that technique, there has to be some relationship between A and B. And if they are absolutely not related, no technique is possible, no method, no system is possible. Then how A can change and the B can come into existence? In what way it is possible? So, in what way the mutation is possible? Now, if it is not possible, Krishnamurti wouldn't have talked about it. Then there is no hope for humanity. They have to just wait for this crisis in consciousness to come to its natural end, which is the annihilation of human beings. But that is not so. That means the mutation is a possibility. But in what way it is possible? Now, even in technology or in science, there are these mutations. Now, we are not talking about biological mutation. We are talking about the mutations which happen in nuclear reactions. So, in those mutations, a base metal changes into a very expensive metal. Like say base metal like iron or all these things which are, it can change into gold or it can change into platinum. Now, iron and gold or platinum, they have no connection, no relationship and nothing. And chemically and otherwise also you cannot convert iron into gold. Although there are stories of that touchstone which if you touch the iron becomes the gold, but those are just the mythical stories, those are just the mythology, and actuality doesn't exist. But there is a phenomenon of mutation even in nuclear reactions. So what they do is that they bombard a given sample with heavy nuclear particles, and through that collisions, the sample which is bombarded can mutate and get converted into gold or any other valuable material or metal. Now, what they have found is that more the energy of the particle which are bombarding that sample, more is the possibility of mutation. More the number of particles, more is the possibility of mutation. So, they talk about the possibility of mutation, the probability of mutation. They don't talk about the mutation definitely taking place, or they don't talk about the method of mutation. They will say that if you do this experiment, then it is more likely that the mutation will happen and you will get the valuable metal or valuable material. So, similarly, can we ask whether there is something which we can do which can make the mutation more probable, which will raise the probability of mutation. We cannot actually make the mutation happen, because if we make it happen, then it is not mutation. Because then there is a definite method, there is a definite process, and so it is merely one thing changing into another, and with some correlation between those two, and therefore it cannot be called as mutation, because it then can be reversed, and mutation is an irreversible process. And so we can say that, is there anything which we can do in our life which will raise or increase the probability of the mutation, probability of the psychological mutation happening with us? And if we are able to do that, then yes, we are creating a possibility that a mutation can happen. And even if one human being is able to undergo that mutation, then that will become mutation more probable for rest of the human beings also. Because once a breakthrough is done, then the further similar happenings, they become easier. They become also more probable. So that brings us to this question. Because in nature, anything that happens needs energy. Without energy, nothing is possible. The whole movement in nature is actually the movement of this energy. And without energy, no movement is possible, no change is possible, nothing is possible. Everything then just becomes the stationary, nothing moving. So the energy is at the heart of all this movement, all the things that are happening. And if we want the mutation to happen, energy is required for that mutation to happen. Without energy, mutation will not happen. Now, where from this energy is going to come? Say, I want mutation to happen in my life, right? And I see that without energy, mutation cannot happen. Then, where am I to get that energy to create the possibility of mutation? Right? That's a natural question that follows. Now, that energy you are not going to get from outside. It's not going to come to you from some remote place in the cosmos, as the Reiki people believe. It's not going to come to you through other human beings or through other resources or sources, whatever it is. That energy has to come from your own life. That is your only source. There is no other source of energy for you except your own life. But when I look at my life, I don't see energy. I am tired. I am spent up. I want to do so many things. I don't seem to have energy. And where am I to get energy for this mutation to happen? Mutation, a radical change, a permanent change. Even to go from here to there, we need energy. And now we want the mutation to happen in our life so that we change psychologically. And where do we find energy? Now, so the obvious question is, why there is no energy in my life? Why I don't have energy? So I have to ask, where do I get my energy from? Am I wasting my energy? How am I spending my energy as I live my day-to-day life. Now, if I am wasting my energy in my day-to-day activities, then naturally I don't have energy left for the mutation. And then when you will start looking at your life as to how you spend your energy as you live your day-to-day life, you will find that yes, you are doing many activities which are actually not necessary for you to do. And through those activities, you are spending your energy. And not only that, by a wrong way of living also, you are spending lot of energy through habits, through psychological conflicts. Psychological conflict is the major source of the consumption or wastage of energy. The moment there is a conflict between two human beings, there is tremendous loss of energy. We lose or spend our energy through gossip, the endless chat, endless talk, by wrong food habits, by wrongly living, that means not living in a healthy way, consuming food items which are not suitable for the body, consuming alcohols, use of tobacco, narcotics, food obtained by killing animals. All these things, they waste your energy. And all the psychological things that happen within you, that is also a major source of wastage of energy. So you will find that throughout the day, you are wasting your energy in many ways. And when you are spending your energy in that way, naturally you have no energy left for this mutation to happen. So, which means that you have to find out a way of living which, instead of wasting energy, will gather energy. Right? By way of living, we should not be losing our energy, but by way of living, we should be gaining energy, we should be gathering energy, and that is the correct way of living. Our present way of living is we are losing energy. We have to reverse that and change our way of living so that instead of losing energy, we gather energy. Now, if we are able to live like that, then Krishnamurti says that that is the real religious life. If you are able to live in such a way that you are all the time gathering energy, then that is the religious way of life. And then that gathered energy you are going to employ to create a possibility of this psychological mutation. So, which means that to create a possibility of psychological mutation, one has to find out where one is wasting one's energy as one lives one's day-to-day life. Wherever possible, change those things immediately. The major source of the wastage of energy is the psychological conflict. The conflict between husband and wife, conflict between parents and children, conflict with the neighbor, conflict with any other human being, conflict between nations, conflict between two races, two religions. You see, all over the world, there is so much conflict. Conflict in the corporate world also. I must have more profit than the other fellow. And this conflict is the major source of wastage of energy. And at the individual level, we may not be able to prevent wars, We may not be able to prevent the wastage of energy at that level. But at the level of our own life as individual, can I at least ask that as I live my life, can I live my life without any psychological conflict? If I am living with another human being, then can I live with that another human being without any conflict? Because that alone will give energy to me. And then of course from that then we have to go into why this conflict, why it arises, and not in terms of collecting or gathering information and then using that information to change the conflict, but to understand the whole nature of conflict, and through understanding the conflict coming to an end. You see, the Krishnamurti's approach is unique in the sense that everything has to be through understanding. So, wisdom is the way of Krishnamurti. Through wisdom only you can change, you can do these things. So, there is no point in struggling, there is no point in forcing, there is no point in coercing yourself, there is no point in disciplining. But if you understand why things are happening in this way, and out of that understanding, you are able to change the way the things happen. And for psychological understanding, he says that you don't need time. For physical, yes, you need time. You have to have physical skill, you have to practice, and become better and better. Like they say, the practice makes the perfect. There is a proverb like that. So if you are trying to develop certain skill in you, you go on practicing it. And eventually you become skillful in that thing. But psychologically, the practice will not make you perfect. Because what are you going to practice? In psychological field, you have all this psychological content, anger, you have jealousy, you have all these things. Now what are you going to practice with them? There is nothing to practice there. And you cannot change anger into non-anger. You cannot change violence into non-violence. So the change there means the complete ending of that. So if anger has to change, then the only meaningful change as far as anger is concerned is the complete ending of anger. So that anger is no longer there, it is finished. So if the anger is not there, you don't have to become non-violent, because violence itself is not there. So if there is no violence, there is no need to become non-violent also. So there is a change. So how this change again is possible? Right? Because we have said that only through understanding. Which means that there is a psychological reaction in me. I want that reaction to come to an end. Therefore, I have to understand it. Understanding will come through learning. I have to learn about it. And how do I learn? I don't learn it from books. I don't learn it from others. The only way of learning is to observe. Just as a scientist learns, scientist doesn't ask others, please, because if it is completely new innovation or new invention, then the scientist himself has to work. He has to experiment, he has to observe, he has to take notes out of his observation, try to correlate and develop some understanding of that thing. So, everything the scientist has to do himself. Similarly, if I want to understand a psychological reaction that arises in me, I have to observe it. I have to observe it, learn about it, and observe it in my relationship. Because where will you observe? Right? If I sit down quietly and I want to observe my psychological reaction, I find that there is no reaction. The mind is just blank, nothing is coming. So, I can't observe. But when I am interacting with another human being, and in that interaction, when the psychological reaction arises, that is my opportunity to observe. That time I can observe it. So, which means that as we live our daily life, do we take this opportunity to observe our reactions as they arise? I am talking to, say, my wife or my husband, and while talking, a psychological response is arising in me. Am I watching that? Am I observing that? Because only through observation I will understand. Most of the time I am not observing. I am not even aware what is happening to me. And suddenly I react to what the other person has said. And after the reaction, when a consequence arises, then I become aware. And I say, oh, I shouldn't have said this, or I shouldn't have reacted like this. But then it is too late. The consequence has been already there. So, observing, watching. Right? But the other difficulty that arises here is, through observation, if you are going to gather knowledge and information about the psychological reaction, and then use that knowledge and information to change that psychological reaction, then you face another difficulty. You may have all the knowledge of the anger, the reaction of anger. Right? You have observed how you get angry in your interaction, when you get angry, what you do, how you respond, then how the other person responds, right? And how to get over that anger, in the sense that you also devise a method to manage that anger. You may say that, okay, I have to count from 100 to 0 backwards, or I have to isolate myself, go to a separate room. In the ancient days, they used to have what is called a krodhagar, a room where an angry person should retire and he will be all alone in that room, and he has to remain there till his anger has completely subsided, so that when he interacts, he doesn't create a problem for others and for himself. So, like that you can devise, and you may become skillful in managing your anger, right? But such a person who has developed a skill to manage the anger, if you ask, is he really free from anger? Because when the provocation is there, he will get angry. And if he gets angry, means he is not free from anger. He only knows what he can do or he has to do when he gets angry. But he can't prevent from himself from getting angry. In a provocation or provocative situation, he will get angry. So, if a person who preaches you how to get rid of your anger, right, and himself he gets angry whenever there is a provocation, So, will you say that he understands anger or he is free from anger? He doesn't. So, then what is the use of all the knowledge and information that he has gathered about the reaction of anger? He can become professor of anger, anger management, or he can become a psychologist who will teach you how to manage your angers and various reactions. But he himself will react in the same way, and maybe on occasions he may not himself be able to manage his own psychological reactions. So, which means that the knowledge or information doesn't seem to bring the understanding of a psychological reaction. Understanding in the sense that the freedom, because they say that the freedom comes only through understanding. And if you are not free of anger, that means you have not understood the anger. And this is very interesting, because in dialogue with Krishnamurti, say he is talking about fear and he is explaining everything about fear, how it arises and so on. And at the end of that, he will ask you a question, so sir, have you understood fear? And if you say yes, then he will say that, so you will never be afraid again. Now, to that statement, the people will just be quiet. They will say, sir, we can't guarantee that. Now, if you can't say that you will never be afraid, then you have not understood fear. Then he will again go back and try to explain in a different way and so on. So, which means that even when he is explaining what is fear, we are merely gathering knowledge and information about fear, and we are saying that yes, we understand fear. That is only an intellectual understanding. That will not prevent the fear from happening. When there is a corresponding situation, a person will be afraid, and therefore there is no freedom from fear. And if there is no freedom from fear, Krishnamurti will say, therefore you have not understood what is fear. Because understanding brings freedom. So, if one understands this in the sense that the knowledge and information is of not much use to learn about your psychological reactions or anything psychological you want to understand or learn, you cannot understand or learn it in terms of knowledge and information, because that doesn't bring freedom. And therefore, Krishnamurti poses a question that is there a different kind of observation, a different kind of learning, right, which doesn't gather knowledge or information. So, he calls it as non-accumulative learning or non-accumulative observation. The observation in technology is always accumulative, because through observation the scientist is acquiring knowledge, gathering knowledge, information, and on the basis of that knowledge and information, he is trying to understand the phenomenon at the physical level. But here in the psychological field, we have to observe, we have to learn, but without accumulating any knowledge, without accumulating any information. Now, this creates another puzzle for us, because then you may ask, what does it mean to observe without accumulating, right? Because the moment you look at something and you label it, then you have already gathered knowledge, because labeling comes from knowledge. So, if you are observing your own psychological reaction, is it possible to observe it without labeling? Whatever that reaction may be. If it is a reaction of anger, the moment you label it as anger, you have already brought in knowledge in your observation, then you are not observing it. Which means that in your memory, you have a recording of a psychological reaction which you have labeled as anger, and this reaction which is arising in the present, you have already compared it with that earlier recorded, and therefore already transferred the label of that recorded to this new happening, and therefore the moment you label, you have already brought knowledge into your observation, and which means that then it's not a non-accumulative observation. So you will say that then how to observe without labeling? You can't try to prevent labeling from happening, because that is our habit, that is how we have been living, and you will find that the labeling does happen. Anything that arises in us, immediately it is recognized, labeled, and you may say that yes, now I feel jealous, or now I am afraid, or I am worried, or I am this, or I am that. Every time the labeling is given, and this labeling is not with respect to our psychological reactions, it is also with respect to the human beings with whom we interact. When you interact with a person and call her as your wife, then you have already labeled that human being as your wife, and then all the knowledge and information that is associated with that label wife, right, comes into play there. And then you say that if she is my wife, then she can't be this, or she has to be this, and all those things, and you are now creating conflict. But if you are able to observe her without labeling, she is a human being like you. Wife is just the relationship which you have established, you have created. Otherwise, she is a human being, you are a human being. And therefore, if you are able to look at her as a human being, then probably you will not bring in all that knowledge information which you have stored in your memory, and therefore you will be able to relate with that person afresh. Yeah, please sit, sir. Yeah, no, it's okay. So, whatever at psychological level, the same is valid at the physical level also. That means a non-accumulative observation, observing without the interference of knowledge, that means observing without labeling, just observe. Now, what does that mean? It means that because to observe means to be in contact with. Without the contact, the observation is not possible. When you are looking at, say, that door, then there has to be contact between me and the door, and the contact is through the rays of light which are reflected from the door. So the rays of light connect that door with me, and the image of that door then going to the brain, and then we recognize that as a door. So there is a contact. Now, when I want to observe something within me, do I need any different thing to make contact between me and what I want to look at? Say, my reaction of anger. I want to look at the anger, right? Which means that I have to be in contact with that anger. But who am I? Am I different from anger? Or I am also part of the anger? Or anger is part of me? So, if I am not different from anger, or anger is not different from me, right? Which means that I am already The contact is already there. That means there is only anger. There is only anger. There is no separate me. There is no me separate from anger. But what actually happens is that when we are in the state of anger, right, the moment you label and say it's anger, that time itself the me who is separate from anger gets created. As long as you don't label, there is no me or self separate from anger. But the moment you label it, say it is anger, then the me comes there. And the moment the me comes, then it will say, oh, I should not be angry, or I must control my anger, or I should do this, or I should do that, and the whole activity begins. And that activity only further strengthens that reaction, because all that will get added to your memory. And in your memory, you already have a content labeled as anger. So to that content, you will add more content, and therefore the anger is getting strengthened. So that is how, as we live our daily life, we are all the time strengthening the storehouse of our psychological content. But if we don't label, then the reaction of anger is anger. Not labeling means no interference from the self, because self is not there. And if there is no interference, which means that there is no condemnation, there is no justification, there is no separation, there is no control, there is no escape, there is no mental or psychological activity in connection with that reaction. The reaction is completely by itself. Then only the reaction. So that sensation, the reaction is a sensation, the feeling I actually feel within me when it arises. When you are angry, there is actually that sensation, that feeling which has arisen in you. And so there is only that sensation, that feeling, completely left to itself, not being encouraged nor being discouraged, nothing, right? Then you will find that that sensation or feeling, as it has arisen, it also subsides, because you are not doing anything with it. Merely there is an observation. There is only an awareness of that, because the observation at the psychological level amounts to being aware, because what you want to look at is already there within you. So you don't need the eyes to look at it, you don't need the ears to listen to it, you don't need any sensory organs, because the function of the sensory organ is only to transfer the image from outside, received from outside, to the brain. And the brain processes that image and recognizes the outside object. But here in this case, what you want to look at is already within you. So there is no role for sensory organs here. So if there is no sensory organ, then what does seeing, what does listening mean? Because those activities are in relation to the corresponding sensory organs. So this listening, seeing and all these things, it just amounts to being aware. When it it is in context with watching the psychological reactions or psychological content. And so there is only an awareness of the psychological reaction. There is nothing else. And therefore, that sensation, that feeling, as it has arisen, it will also subside, it will fall. And when it subsides or falls, then it is finished. Then it doesn't get added to your memory as further psychological content. And when it ends in this way, right, then to the extent it has ended, there is a sense of freedom which you feel. And this way then, the energy which was trapped or consumed in that psychological reaction is released, is gathered. And we want to gather energy. So which means that as we live our daily life, as the reactions arise in us psychologically, by watching those reactions with a non-accumulative observation, those reactions therefore coming to their natural end releases lots of energy which was invested, which was trapped in that psychological reaction. And that energy then is the energy which you gather. And that energy then becomes the energy of your attention. Because in order to observe, you have to pay attention. And attention is energy. And so, with that energy, your attention becomes more and more intense, more and more potent. And therefore, when there is a substantial energy in the attention, the moment you attend, the reaction is finished. You won't need time. But for that, your attention should have gathered that kind of energy. And it will get gathered only when you observe yourself in this way. So, in our daily life, as we interact, through that interaction, as psychological responses arise within us, through this way of non-accumulative observation, right, you gather a lot of energy. And that energy then can make the mutation possible. And actually, Krishnamurti says that that is the only religious way of life, religious way of living. Not going to temples, not doing japas, not this, that. Live rightly, live, gather energy, use that energy to understand your own life, and then you are a really religious person. So religion means that. And when a threshold of energy is reached, the mutation will happen. And when the mutation happens, then there is a total change. Because what comes into existence after mutation has nothing to do with what was before mutation. It's completely new. And in that new dimension alone, Krishnaji says that you will find love, you will find intelligence, you will find compassion. You cannot find these things in the psychological realm, in the field of thought. Only when you mutate and enter a completely different dimension, that is where you will find these qualities of life. And with those qualities, then when they come into your life is completely transformed. Then you are at peace with yourself, you are also at peace with the whole world. And then whatever you do is always right. It will not lead to any conflict. So that is this whole approach of mutation. What is mutation and why it is necessary and how it is possible. So we have tried to explore it, and now is the time for questions. So through the questions you ask, we will take this dialogue further.
Finding love or compassion.
Yes.
Regarding that.
Yes.
We become love, or we can find love from others, compassion from others.
Yes.
That person.
Yes.
That one. Second thing, we become love, we become compassion.
Yeah.
Regarding the mutation.
Yeah.
Mutation,
Yeah.
So which one is saying, sir?
Now what we are saying is that due to mutation, there will be these qualities in the person who has undergone this mutation. Now, when these qualities become or are his life, then through that alone he will be interacting with others, right? And so in his interaction, these qualities will be there, will play. And therefore, when the action happens out of these qualities, that action will be always right. It will not lead to any conflict. And therefore, this person will be able to live in the world without any conflict. And so whosoever interacts with him or comes in contact with him, right, he will feel that yes, this person is different. He doesn't mean any harm to him. And interacting with this person is simple, easy. And that will affect him in certain way. And therefore, if he has come to you in an agitated state of mind, he will quieten down. That is the effect of those qualities. The real compassion, the real love has that kind of effect. And so it will reflect in your interaction. And so in that interaction, then the kind of response you will draw from others will be also different. And even if the response is not as it should be, you will not get affected by that response. Because this is very important. A person in whose life love is there, now that person cannot or will not go back and say that I hate this person. You see, that's why, the love is not conditional. You see, the moment you say love is irrespective of time, irrespective of space. What I mean is that if it is love towards X, it is also love towards Y, it is love towards Z, it is love towards anybody. Just because somebody is different, therefore you have different response to him, that is not possible. Which means that It's not possible that I love one person and I hate another person. That is not possible. Then it is not love. Then it is something the thought has created and labeled as love. And no, and just one more point. And then with respect to time, it cannot be that today I love and tomorrow I hate. And that is what you will find mostly happening in many relationships. Two persons, they fall in love, they say we are in love, we love each other, right? And after living with each other for quite a time period, then that love is lost. And they say that now we hate each other. So, love before, hate afterwards. Then it was not love. If it is love today, it will be love always. Tomorrow or any number of tomorrows, it will be love only. It cannot change into hate. If it changes into hate, then it was not love. I had labeled something else as love. Maybe the attachment or my crush or my fascination, I labeled as love. And therefore, it will change into hate.
Due to others' behavior, due to other person's behavior,
Due to whatever. Due to whatever. See, if because of the other person, you lose that sense of love and you start hating that person, then which means that in the very first place it was not love. The very fact that it could be disturbed and you could be made to hate, which means that it was not love at all. So in fact that person has helped you to see that what you were considering as love was not love after all, because you are now hating. And so if it was love, it would be love now also. So if you say that you love your wife, whatever she may do, to whatever extent she may get angry, to whatever extent she may become violent, psychologically react and all these things, right? Your response is only love, nothing else. And out of that love, you will know, or whatever the right action that will happen. Which is obvious. I mean, when you find other person completely agitated, completely angry, violent, right? You don't go and start teaching philosophy to that person, or you don't go and advise control and all those things. You have to just watch with all that love, and the temper will come down. You will not do anything which will exaggerate or enhance that situation of anger.
repeated mistakes and the person.
Whatever it is.
Love.
Krishnaji says, no, love has infinite patience. So a person making repeated mistakes doesn't matter. Why should it affect your state of love? Your state of love is absolute. No external situations or conditions can affect it. And if it gets affected, then it is not love. You see that Krishnaji puts all these qualities at the absolute level. Love is always love, cannot change into hate. And therefore, a person who says he loves, or there is love in his life, then all his behavior, all his actions is only through that and nothing else. If it is a love which is created by thought, right, then it will be something else, then it will not be love. Then when such a person will find himself in that situation, he will say, why only I have to adjust all the time? Why that person doesn't understand? Why I have to always take a one down ship, and why the other person always has one up one ship? And when I have explained so many times, why the person keeps on doing the same mistakes, and so on. So all that measurement, that calculation, that comparison, it will come, and the other person also doing the same, finished, it's all conflict and no energy, no mutation. And therefore, you see, this points out a very interesting another factor, which is you cannot really love as long as there is self. The self is going to react. So the self, if it is hidden in any way, in any corner of your consciousness, will react and is going to destroy all that you have built up as love. So the real love is possible only when the self is finished, is completely gone, when there is no self at all. And so we get another hint here. Total unselfishness is probably a necessary condition for the love to exist. And then in practical terms, you can ask yourself, are you at least doing some things in your life in a totally unselfish way, where you are not expecting anything, you are not demanding anything, right? And the immediate person you can do this thing is your husband or your wife. Do something for him or her without expecting anything from that person, and whether you can do it. So we get lots of such clues, as you explore, you investigate, you get lots of clues as to what you can do in your day-to-day life to conserve, to gather the energy. So I may not have that divine love in me, right? But when I understand that demands total unselfishness, I am not totally unselfishness as yet, but can I be unselfish at least in some things, in some of my interactions? Let me at least make the beginning.
After mutation, man, after mutation, he loses all his self.
There is no self.
Yes. When there is no self, he can love anybody. Yes. Universal love.
Yes.
It is divine love.
Yes. Love is always divine.
Divine.
Yes.
That is has to be attained only after mutation. The whole.
Yeah, I mean, that will come when the mutation happens, right? But what we are saying here is that, what we are pointing out is that, do I have to wait till the mutation happens? And my waiting, will it bring about that mutation? It is not going to bring. I may wait for millions of years, mutation is not going to happen. And that love is not going to come into being. So what we were trying in this dialogue, we were trying to find out what I can do from wherever I am, here and now, to make that mutation possible. That is what we are investigating. And through that, we have explored so many things. We have got so many hints what we can do at whatever level we are, and how it can help the gathering of energy. So we have said that if the self is there, there cannot be law. Now I am not totally unselfish, the self is very much there. It may be active at various levels. But can I at least ask, can I do at least one thing without any selfishness? See, the minimum. Yeah, the beginning. Now if I can't do that also, then there is no hope for me. Then it's finished.
That means mutation is not sudden.
Pardon?
That means mutation is not sudden.
No. Why do you say mutation is not sudden? When mutation happens, wait, sir. You see, by exploring the factors which can make mutation possible, are you trying to establish a causal relationship between these factors and the mutation? If you are, then you are making a process out of it. And then you will say that means mutation is not immediate. It is going to take time because you have to do all these things. And unless you do all these things, the mutation will not happen. And therefore, how can you say that the mutation happens immediately or instantly? It has taken time, right? So that is what we are saying is not that. We are not saying that we are working to make that mutation happen. It's not in our hands. You open the window of your room, the breeze may come or may not come. But if you don't open the window, the breeze will definitely not come. Right? So by opening the window, right, are you saying that I am making the breeze come into my room? You cannot. You can only open the window and hope. So here also you do whatever will enhance the possibility of mutation happening. But will the mutation happen? That is not in your hands. It's like a breeze. It may come, it may not come. But if you don't do even that, the mutation will definitely not happen. You got my point?
Again asking you, is mutation is a process?
Mutation is not a process. Mutation is an instantaneous change, a sudden change, not over a period of time. Change is irreversible, no question of going back. Change is so total that no trace of the old is left behind. Whatever comes into being is totally new, was not there before. That is the nature of mutation. So if we say that Krishnamurti had undergone mutation, so whatever Krishnamurti is visible to us, right? So he will say that he was never conditioned. Right? If he says he was conditioned, then how did he move from conditioned being to unconditioned being? That means whatever he is now is related to what he was before. Do you get the subtle point in this? A mutated entity, whatever has come into existence after mutation, right, it's a completely new. It has no connection, contact with the old. So if you ask that entity, were you this before? Never, it will say. It's completely new. It will say it was never that. Yeah, now Selva, you can ask. Yeah, sorry.
Maybe the question may be inappropriate, but in Theosophy undertaking Krishnamurti, he is into the preparation of world nature. And I don't know whether I'm sure. So before the prediction itself, they understood that there is a possibility of mutation, or then he is undergoing this process into the Theosophy, and And then after that, all these things helps to come into the mutation state of it. That's my.
I want your question. What exactly you are asking?
Is the Theosophy responsible for the mutation?
Is Theosophy responsible for
After that,
the mutation of Krishnamurti?
yes.
That is what your question
Yes.
is.
Also, there is some media I heard they were saying that when he was a child, 13 age, 14 age, they were able to sense that there is no self at all, something that kind of quality when they saw the
Yes,
person.
that's right. Yes.
So that is one question. And then during the process, that number of years with the content Theosophy, that enhances the possibility to come into the point where we undergo the mutation. That is the question. Or is it by naturally having that potential?
Yeah. Yes. Now, we have said that love can be there where the self is not. So, when CWL discovered that boy, he was completely wondering. He was completely, you can say, fascinated, because he did not see even a speck of selfishness in that boy. Such clean, clear, pure aura. Didn't see any of those traces. And he had never seen such clean and pure aura of any other human being in his life. And so he was wondering, who is this boy? Why does he have such clean aura? And through his clairvoyance, when he investigated, he found that yes, through this boy, the world teacher is going to manifest and give a new teaching to the world. And he mentioned this to Annie Besant, and she also corroborated by saying that yes, this is the boy. Right? And much before that, it was felt that the humanity is at a stage where it needs a new teaching. And that we can really see, because we have said that the human beings have not changed psychologically. We have a highly developed technology in the hands of very psychologically primitive. And then who is going to change the human beings? Who is going to point out?
By the time 2 world wars have already taken place.
Pardon?
By the time 2 world wars have already been taken place. Even without this advancement of technology, 2 world wars have already been taken place.
Yeah, but the technology was at that time at the level of industrial revolution.
No, that time it was also advanced stage.
Yeah, advanced.
At that time. Relative.
No, see, that's a very minor point. Because the industrial revolution had already taken place, people were already using machines. So the work of their limbs was already taken over by the machines. So you had vehicles which could run faster than a human being can run, his legs can run. You can produce or make things much faster and much larger scale than what the human beings could do with their hands. So the function of the hands and the legs was already taken over by the machines. And what the modern technology has done is that the function of the brain is also being taken over. Yes. So which means that the technology was already there. The main point is this, that there was already, humanity had already reached a stage where they needed to change. There was a need to point out to them in what way they have to change, in what way it is possible to change, right? And who can do that except the world teacher? And so there was already this feeling that probably this is the time when the world teacher is likely to manifest or is going to manifest. And if world teacher is all love, because they say that the world teacher is the Lord of love. He is only love and nothing else. And for love to manifest, the condition is total selflessness. And that is what they found in that boy. Total unselfishness, no trace of any self whatsoever. So naturally, among all those billions of human beings, he was the only human being who was eligible for the manifestation of the world teacher, because he was the only one who did not have any trace of selfishness. And therefore, once this was seen, then naturally he was taken charge of, to be groomed for that role. Now you will ask why the grooming was necessary, right? Now the consciousness of the world teacher, there was not a single human body through which that consciousness could manifest. Tremendous energy. Any human body would have just shattered to pieces if the world teacher tried to manifest in it. Krishnaji has mentioned in his last statement that you don't know what went through this body. He said it was like a 12-cylinder engine. The energy of a 12-cylinder engine functioned through his body, right? Now that kind of energy, if it is to function through our body, why 12 only, one cylinder only, our body will just get shattered. Forget about 12 cylinders. Our body will be completely shattered to pieces. Our body cannot withstand that kind of energy. So, for the body to enable it to hold that kind of energy, a preparation was required. Without preparing the body, it cannot hold that kind of energy. And therefore, the process. But before the process, the person is able to undergo the process, he has to be physically fit. And so, all the preparation. So, which means that when he was discovered, when the possibility of the world teacher manifesting in him was seen, right, and confirmed, then the boy was adopted by Annie Besant as her son. So she took all the guardianship, and then they started their work to prepare that body for the manifestation of the world teacher. And the first thing is to make it physically healthy. So developing healthy habits, healthy ways of living, and which means that they should not have anything in them which will come in the way of the function of the world teacher. Whatever world teacher wants to do through that body, there should not be nothing in that body which will create any kind of resistance or opposition to what the world teacher wants to do through that body. And therefore, all the habits, all the idiosyncrasies, everything, they had to just roll them out, just finish. Not only that, they wanted the body to be very beautiful, very handsome. How can a world teacher have ugly body? Because the beauty goes with love. And therefore, whatever small things they found, like say his feet were slightly, they were not straight or slightly deformed, so they made him wear certain types of shoes to put those feet in his right shape. Because how can world teacher have such deformed kind of looking feet? Then they put braces in his teeth because there were gaps, and therefore they put braces. And so physically they groomed him all possible ways. His eating habits, if he starts liking food which is not very healthy for the body, then the body will not cooperate fully with whatever the world teacher wants to do, and therefore all the likes and dislikes for unhealthy food were again worked out completely. So if that boy says that I like this atom very much, then till he says he doesn't like it, every day he will be given that atom only to eat. If he says I like palak paneer, every day he will be given palak paneer, till he says he no longer likes palak paneer. So all the desire for that is worked out, gone. So it's not going to become a problem for the world teacher. So like that, he was physically groomed. His body was prepared for that function. And what about his mind? So the mind was left completely untouched, because there was a clear instruction of the world teacher that groom the boy physically, do everything to create a healthy body, but leave his mind alone. Don't tamper with it, don't do anything with it, the world teacher will take care of it. So they did not even teach him theosophy. They did not try to condition his mind in any way. And Krishnamurti has always said that his mind was always vacant. It was never filled up with all kinds of philosophical thoughts or this or that or that. The only thing they taught him was the English language, because that was the language which the world teacher was going to use for his communication. So he was taught language, and maybe a little bit of some other subjects. But they did not try to condition his mind or create a kind of mental attitude according to any school of philosophy, including theosophy. They had to just leave it blank. And when the process happened and the body was prepared, and process happened over a period of time. Initially it happened very intensely, later on slightly in a milder way, and it kept on happening throughout his life. It was not that it was just that, because whenever there is a accumulation which can affect or create obstruction, to remove that accumulation the process had to happen. And then again so Krishna used to call that it is like taking a bath. The process was like taking a bath, because you take bath because as you live your day-to-day life, the body gets dirty or dust or all kinds of things, no? And to clean it, you take bath. So similarly, to maintain the cleanliness and purity of that body, that process had to happen. The only unfortunate thing was that the process was very painful. Yes. Now, the question arises, does everyone have to undergo the process in order to mutate, in order to come upon that love or compassion? And this question was raised by David Bohm while discussing with Krishnamurti, because he said that if the process is a necessary condition, then probably nobody will be interested in that mutation, because nobody wants to go through such pain which you have gone through. And to that Krishna said that yes, process is not necessary. In fact, the interesting thing is that Krishnaji says that the teaching which he gave is not the product of the process. Teaching is not the product of his brain. He says teaching is entirely, it has got nothing to do with this. Then you will ask, then why the process? The process was the preparation of the body. unless the body is prepared, the teaching couldn't come through it. So the source of the teaching is entirely different. It's not the Krishnamurti's brain, it's not the process, nothing. It is totally different. So that is the world teacher.
Is there any difference listening to the world teacher directly, reading the teachings of the world teacher seriously? How can one have this touch of the world teacher now?
No, I didn't get your question.
Is there any difference listening to the world teacher
No, you are
directly?
asking, is there a difference between listening to the world teacher directly and reading his words or watching his videos and all these things?
No, wait. If those words are of no use, Krishnamurti wouldn't have asked to preserve them. He wouldn't have published books. Videos wouldn't have been recorded because they are of no use. It's not that. You see, those are the words which have come about while trying to communicate the wisdom which the world teacher wanted to convey. Right? Which means what? Which means that those words are the indicators, they are the pointers. They are the pointers towards that wisdom. Because they have come from that wisdom, they serve as the pointers to that wisdom. The words themselves don't carry that wisdom in themselves. Wisdom is not some material thing or mechanical thing, right? Just as you have stuffed paratha, so the words are not like stuffed wisdom in them. Words are only the indicators, the pointers to the wisdom, to that teaching or whatever he is trying to convey. They themselves don't hold the content of that wisdom. No other words can be the pointers to the wisdom. Only the words which have tried to express that wisdom, only those words can be the pointers. And therefore, whatever he has said, all his books, teachings, everything, including the videos, they are all the pointers to that. And if you have a pointer, then that pointer can certainly help you to reach or to go there, provided you use them as the pointers. But what we do is that instead of using those words as the pointer, we try to give our meaning to those words by what we understand. So if he talks about meditation, to that word meditation which he is giving us as a pointer, we are attaching what we understand by meditation. And then we say that yes, by meditation he means this or he means that. So which means that we are not using the word as a pointer. We are assigning our own things, we are imposing our own things on that word, and then being either happy or unhappy about whatever the outcome. So then we are missing the point completely.
Like stopping the journey at the point.
Yes.
Then how one read Krishna's teachings without interpreting it in a sense, how to read the teachings?
Yeah, I mean, see, when you read his teaching, right, now the first thing is that happens is that there is an intellectual understanding. Anyway, you are using those words, so you are aware of the general meaning of those words, in what context they are used and all these things. and with all that you arrive at some intellectual understanding of those words, right? Now with those intellectual understandings, right, you have to remain with that intellectual understanding and then try to find out how it relates with your day-to-day life, right? And when you try to put that intellectual understanding in action in your day-to-day life, that is where you will start understanding the real content of that word. So that is actually the approach. So the intellectual understanding is not all useless or false or all these things. It becomes useless when it is not applied in your day-to-day life vis-a-vis the actions, right? So it's like you say that, yes, I want to find out the truth of life. Now I have some little bit of intellectual understanding of what truth means and all these things, right? So do I apply it in my day-to-day life, in my actions, right? Or I don't apply. If I speak lie, if I speak false, then I am not applying this. And if you observe your actions in your day-to-day life, you will find that how many times you have unnecessarily spoken a lie. That means speaking truth was no problem to you, but yet you have spoken a lie unnecessarily. Small things. You are supposed to visit your friend's place at a certain time, you are late. You haven't even started. The friend calls you, right? And you say, yes, I am on the way, just about to reach. Spoken a lie, false. You have not even started from your house. So why don't you say that I haven't yet started from my house, I am about to start and I will reach there. That would have been a statement of fact, the truth. And why was the need to say this, that yes, I am just on the way, reaching there in 2 minutes. And our measurement and all these things also so false. We know that in 2 minutes we are not going to reach. We are going to take half an hour or 15-20 minutes. Then why not say I am going to take 15-20 minutes? Why say 2 minutes? So this way we are deceiving ourselves. This way we are doing things which are false and living that kind of life. We expect to find that ultimate truth. How is it possible? Not possible.
One last question. What is the relation between the mutation and the religiousness?
Mutation and
Religiousness.
Religiousness.
relation.
What is religion?
Religiousness.
Mutation is religious life.
Religiousness.
Religiousness.
Religiousness. What do you mean by religiousness?
You have used the master. In your thought, you have used it.
Yeah. So no, what we have said is that religion means to gather all your energy. And without energy, mutation cannot happen. Right? We said for the mutation to happen, you have to have energy. And to have energy, you have to gather it from your life only. There is no other source of energy except your life. So, if you live a life where you are all the time gathering the energy, right, then that is what the religion is, that is what the religious life is. And if religious life gathers energy, and because of that gathered energy mutation happens, right, then you can easily see the correlation. It means that only through leading a religious life, in this sense, the mutation can happen. If you are not living a religious life, mutation will not happen. This is the connection between the two. Yes, sir. So many. Okay, let's. Paresh, go ahead. Yeah.
In mutation, let's say I am not understanding what ends in mutation.
Oh, okay. You are saying what ends in the mutation that you are not getting.
Like for example, I get angry. I have feelings associated with it, and there is labeling which is from self. So that creates conflict. So in this structure, I don't get what is ending.
Okay, I will go into further details of that. What is ending is the psychological reaction. The psychological reaction is the sensation, the feeling that arises in response to whatever the input, right? Now, in actuality, what holds that sensation, that feeling at the physical level? Those are the brain cells. The brain cells hold that sensation, that feeling at the physical level. Right? And if we say that it is that sensation, that feeling, which is a psychological reaction, that ends. If that ends, that means that it is no longer there in the brain cells. The brain cells which have been carrying all that psychological content in themselves, now that psychological content is no longer there in those brain cells. So which means that the brain cells have changed, because now they are different. They are not going to respond in terms of those psychological reactions. And therefore one can say that the brain has undergone the mutation.
So when you say psychological content, is like I have taken an example of anger. That is
Anger, yes.
So the brain cells have mutated, that means they are not able to respond in terms of anger anymore.
So the sensations will be there.
Sensations will be there. Sensations will be there. Of course, we are not saying that all the sensations have ended, all the feelings have ended. What we have said is that the sensation as anger, the sensation as fear, they have ended. Not all sensation. The human beings or any living being is a sensate being. He has to have sensations, he has to have feeling, he has to have emotions. Right? So, what we are saying is that the sensations and feelings as these various psychological reactions, they have come to an end. And the brain is never going to respond in terms of those kinds of this thing. But that doesn't mean that therefore the brain will have no sensation at all. Then there will be different kinds of sensations, different kind of emotions, but they will not be due to the external input. They will be due to that love and compassion. So they will be of totally different quality. And Krishna has clearly mentioned it, that when the self is not, even the emotions and the feelings which arise in you, they will be of completely different quality. They will not lead to any conflict, nothing. They will be as that compassion and love reflects, then that reflection is those emotions and feelings and sensations. They will be of completely different quality.
So why would energy increase? Because we have law of conservation of energy. I know probably it might not work.
No, don't say conservation of energy. That is valid only in the physical realm, in a limited system. In the world of creation, which is going to be our topic tomorrow, there is no conservation of energy or this or that. There is the abundance of energy. Abundance.
You can only have to tap it.
Yeah.
Tap it.
No, the energy becomes limited when the whole thing manifests. Manifestation is a limitation, is the limited thing. The unmanifest is not limited at all. There is no limit, nothing. And therefore, infinite energy, unlimited. No conservation, nothing. All that principle comes or becomes applicable when the manifestation comes into existence. And with manifestation, the time, the sequence, the cause effect, the karma, the reincarnation, all of that will come once the manifestation takes place. Yeah, Venu?
So we've all been conditioned to strive for enlightenment. And here Krishnamurti is talking about mutation. Mutation. He's never talked about enlightenment, but he should talk a lot about mutation. So is there any correlation between the two?
Yeah, I mean, what we are saying is that when we are seeking enlightenment, we are seeking for light outside. We are pursuing enlightenment as something separate, something different, something out there. But he says, be light to yourself. Be your own light. So which means that the enlightenment, if at all it has to happen in you, within you, not outside. And if it has to happen within you, why are you seeking it? Seeking enlightenment is not going to get it for you. So all that then you can ask is that you need not seek, but you can only ask, what can I do so that the enlightenment happens? It happens. And for that then you have to ask, what is it that is coming in the way, or what is preventing it from happening, and then you are thrown back to your life. So there is no escape from your life.
Sir, just a clarification, sir. Like even for seeking also, Krishnamurti says, if you are seeking means you already have some kind of image of it. That means you already have some image of it and you are seeking that.
Right.
So you have to work from that place. It's not seeking.
Yeah, what he is saying that you can seek only what you know. No, you can seek only what you know. How can you seek what you don't know? When you don't know, how can you seek it? So you can seek only what you know, and if the liberation or enlightenment or whatever it is, if it is not in the field of the known, if it is the unknown, naturally you cannot seek it. You can seek only what is known to you.
Again, maybe a mind has made an image of what it is going to be, and that means again the mind and the self has a play there. If you are seeking means, you are seeking after what your mind and yourself has asked.
Because if you still seek enlightenment, then you are seeking enlightenment of your own idea, according to your own imagination. Because the idea or imagination is the known to you, and that you can certainly seek. So we still have time for some more questions.
Oh, it's 9? Oh. It looked like 8.
You're paying more than 2 hours. Plus, just prove the time.
It's okay. We'll stop here, and tomorrow hopefully we'll meet again. And the topic for tomorrow is the creation, the world of creation.
Thank you, sir.